Hello guys, today I wanted to make a short video about a friend of mine's slk32 AMG that was triggering ABS and BIS warning light on intermittently together with the check engine light. So he left me the car here for a few months. It's been here now and he doesn't really need it, and he doesn't really need it to drive it every day. So the car's been here, and luckily actually stayed here the time that it did. So I scanned the ESP control module and I found that the left rear wheel speed is not being registered. So this is the wheel speed sensor for the left rear. As you can see, there is a little bit of corrosion here on the connector. This connector sits in this rubber cup and actually connects inside the car. The rubber cup stays on the outside. So this is a digital style wheel speed sensor. The way you test the wires here, this sensor is not like the old style that produces voltage when you spin the wheel. This sensor manipulates voltage that it's coming in from the ESP control module. So the way you test the signal from the module, you have to put the key to on position to energize the module, and then on the wiring harness side, on the one wire you should see almost almost battery voltage, and on the other wire you should have ground according to the wiring diagram. And according to the wiring diagram also, this is a pull down style wheel speed sensor, which essentially runs the signal through the power wire. So I tested for power and ground on the wiring harness, and it was all good. I even ringed the wires, removed the connector, figure out which pin actually is this particular wire on the main connector for the ESP, and I ring the wire, make sure it's not shorted or anything, it's healthy wire, and I replaced the sensor at that point, because technically this style sensor, if you have power and ground on the connector here, it's a 100% sensor failure. So I replaced the sensor, test drove the car, everything was fine, but this being an intermittent failure, it's I didn't really find anything intermittent. I mean, it was left to be the sensor failing intermittently. So the car sat for about a month or so, and it was raining, and at some point I decided to move it and drive it, because like I said, my friend doesn't really need this car to drive it every day. And it sat here for about a month. I went to test drive it, and here we go again, the ABS light came on. So at that point I'm thinking the control module is probably failing intermittently, and it didn't hit me that we actually have a water leak that I found out later on, that we have a water leak inside the trunk, and it actually fills up this cup with water. This connector sits inside this cup. As you can see, this connector is not waterproof, simply because it sits inside the car. So there was no reason for Mercedes to make this waterproof. I guess they didn't think it's gonna leak water inside the trunk. But anyway, what I did here was, obviously I killed the brand new sensor that I just replaced, so we had to buy another new sensor. And by the time I test drove the car, by the time I took the car down to the shop to repair it, I went to move it around the parking lot, and it would not shift off of first gear. So at this point, I figure out something more is going on, and I went to hook up a scanner, and I found out that the right side and the left side are now not registering. So this is what happens when the rear wheel speed is not being registered. The transmission is not shifting on these cars off of first gear. So it's important for the rear wheel speed sensors to register speed for this car, for the transmission to shift properly. At that point, I found that both these cups were full with water, and the connectors for the sensor were submerged, and we were shorting the sensor and basically killed the right side too. So what I did here, I haven't found the water leak yet. There was some drains that were plugged on by the trunk that I unclogged, but it still drips when it's heavy rain. It still drips in the trunk. So what I did here, in order to prevent these sensors from being damaged from water shorting them, I cut this much, just this portion here on the sensors that are currently installed on the car, and I pulled the connector through the wiring harness that it's inside the car. That part, I pulled it through and I pulled it out, and I can basically, the connector is now outside of the car, and I used electrical tape to isolate the connector from the weather, and I zip tied the connector. I installed this rubber boot back on the body, and I zip tied the connector outside on the rubber boot, and routed out of the way of the suspension. So that way, when the water leaks inside, it will just drip out from the crack here where I cut it, and the wiring harness, actually, it's not completely sealing this hole. So whatever water finds its way in here, it will just drip out. So it's been several heavy rains since, and no more issues of this kind. These sensors are becoming hard to find, so if you have this car, I highly suggest you correct the wiring the way I did, so you don't experience this problem. Like I said, if you kill both rear wheel speed sensors, you'll be stuck in first gear and you won't be able to shift into higher gear. So yeah, that about wraps it up, and thanks for watching, guys, and I hope this helps somebody, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye now.